What's up, startup founders? I'm Sam Wong with Fundable Startups, and we just released a new training class on startup due diligence, best practices, and tools. One of the most important tools in this class is a ready to use, fill in the blanks financial model. Most startup financial models are not clear, not detailed, and not credible. As an investor with Band of Angels, I designed and built this tool to make it easy to evaluate the parameters used to build the financial projections, as all assumptions are clearly laid out in one place. This color by numbers financial model does the bottoms up calculations of customer growth, revenue, expenses, headcount, profit, cash flow, and funding needs. In addition, the model supports 4 different growth scenarios, including aggressive, mid-range, conservative, and underwhelming growth. When founders show that they've analyzed multiple growth scenarios, investors can have more confidence in the projections. This video is a replay of a webinar where I walk through the features in the model and show how a founder can quickly build a defensible, credible, and detailed multi-scenario financial projection in just a few hours. Let's dive in. All right, everybody can see the slide and we'll get started here, okay? Thanks everybody for joining. This is a session on startup fundraising and focusing on how investors evaluate your financial model. So my name is Sam Wong. I'm with Fundable Startups. Many of you have been to a lot of my webinars or have met me at various journey times over the startup journey. I've been a startup founder for, I've done 5 different startups, all at the CEO, CTO, or VP of engineering level. The first 2 startups shut down. The last 3 did get acquired. This session here is on startup due diligence. It's taken from our startup due diligence class, I should say. That class covers best practices and tools. And we built the class because, in my experience, 80% of startups fail due diligence, which results in delays or deal distress for your fundraising. Okay. What we're trying to do is in this class is cover best practices and tools. We don't want to just cover what you should do as a startup founder, but give you enough information and framework and tools to be able to understand how to do it. So we are going to have some Q&A during, I'll stop for take some questions during the middle of the session. And what I wanted to do right now was just share a quick poll about where everybody is at in your fundraising. Okay. So if you'll pop in and just give your response to the fundraising poll here, that would be great. It helps us understand where everybody's at here in the audience. Okay. And I'm gonna go ahead while the poll is still up. Just dive into the content that we have here. Okay. So typically, the content that most investors ask for in a early stage fundraise is listed here. Okay, we covered this in another one of our startup training classes, or I'm not going to get into all the details. Suffice it to say is that after going through a lot of diligence, both from an investor side as well as the founder side, this is what we found to be the common denominator that many investors ask for. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the poll and let everybody kind of see some of the results so you can get us an idea of where everybody else is at on this event here. Okay, so if this is the list of topics that most startup investors ask for in terms of their diligence, and for those of you who are not familiar, if a startup investor is a professional startup investor is going to consider investing in your startup, they will go through a diligence cycle. Many of them will ask for content similar to this. And what we wanted to focus on is if this is what the investors are asking for, what we're focusing on here is the financial aspect of what they ask for. There's the cap table, financial statements, financial model, a QSBS attestation, as well as potentially some 409A valuation content. In our experience, the 3 that tend to get the most attention: cap table, financial statements, and financial model. And we're doing this session here because the financial model tends to be the absolute worst of the 3. Okay, coming from an investor perspective, this is not a very promising situation where the financial model doesn't really instill a lot of confidence, and we'll get into that here a little bit later. In our due diligence class, which this content here is an excerpt from, you'll notice that we have 22 tools that are included. And of those tools, there's about half a dozen or seven of them that are specifically in the financial silo. Okay. One of which is a 5-year financial model. Okay. And what we're going to go do here is dig into the financial model overview. Okay. So what we found is that most founders, when they try to pitch an investor and they get to the pitch deck and there's the slide that talks about finances, that slide usually has a table or a chart that looks something like this with revenue, expenses, and a projection on the profit several years out. So when an investor sees this information, what usually happens is that they wonder, I've seen slides like this before. And in an investor's experience, almost all founder claims are grossly exaggerated. And by looking at this table, the investor doesn't see any substantive evidence to back up the claims that are in the table. And then the investor concludes generally, I doubt what the founder is trying to show me. That's the reality here. And the unfortunate thing is that investors, having seen this movie many times before, most financial models presented by a startup founder perpetuate doubt. Okay, there's no detail about the reasoning. There's no understanding about the assumptions. There's usually only a single scenario that's ever mentioned, so there's no sensitivity analysis that's discussed when the financial model is presented. There's no tie to user growth. If there's going to be revenue growth, it helps to be able to justify that revenue growth if you have some user growth to go along with it. Oftentimes, there's insufficient granularity because most financial models, at best, are done on a quarterly basis when they really should be broken down at a monthly level. You may not show the monthly detail to the investor, but you should at least make mention of the fact that the numbers that you are showing do reflect a bottoms-up monthly model. There's usually no details on the revenue, no details on expenses, and in most cases, the investor doesn't see any evidence that the model is actually operational. Apologize for the delay there. Had a little bit of a zoom in shot that popped up on my side. But conceptually, what happens here is that most financial models perpetuate doubt. Okay. And unfortunately, what ends up happening is something like this. But this is an example of an actual financial model that I received from a founder. And in literally, this took me about 15 minutes. I'm not going to go into every detail. Every little one of these red boxes represents a problem that I identified. Okay. And I didn't even bother to highlight all the red boxes because the slide would get too busy. All the little red explosion marks that represents other problems that I identified with the particular model. In this case, what what I found is that the model does not reflect any does not build any confidence that the numbers are actually achievable or realistic. When you present your story about your startup, ultimately what you're trying to tell an investor is that there is a pot of gold somewhere at the end of this rainbow. But the reality is you have a situation oftentimes looking something like this where you're at the bottom of a cliff and the pot of gold is at the top of it. It is a bad situation to just leave this story as is because there's no detail about how you're going to reach that pot of gold. Okay. It would be better to say, I am an experienced climber. Here's my climbing gear, and I can scale this little cliff to get to that pot of gold. Fantastic. That's better. However, what would be even better still is our startup builds staircases. Okay. And we can build the staircase so someone without serious climbing skills can get to the pot of gold. In fact, the best situation is if you actually automate this in some way, shape, or form, so somebody doesn't even have to be very fit to be able to climb up those stairs. Okay. You want to be able to show how it's possible on a stepwise basis. All right. So when people go to the financial model, these are things that an investor thinks about in real time. One, what assumptions were used in the model? Two, Are the individual assumptions defensible? Three, does the model result in a credible financial path? Is the model sufficiently granular and actionable? And what other growth scenarios were modeled? So if these are some of the just questions that come up, what you need to do when you're communicating in your pitch deck is to address each one of these issues. So the first issue would be, well, the assumptions can be easily found all in one place in the financial model. We'll be happy to go through it with you if you are interested. Okay. Two is we actually have very plausible SMART goals, and you've probably heard the acronym SMART being specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. Okay. And in addition, what you also want to be able to communicate is we have stress tested and done sensitivity analysis on the model, and we've also done the sanity checks to make sure that, the model didn't just suddenly result in you being a bigger company than Apple Computer and Nvidia combined. Okay, so make sure that what you're trying to present to an investor is sensible, plausible, and makes sense. Then in addition, that you want to be able to show how you've done the bottoms up analysis where revenue is linked to expenses. Expenses is tied to the expenses are tied to the headcount, etc. It's not just a bunch of funny numbers on a spreadsheet. You want to show how it's interrelated because that's how a business is going to be run. Okay. Finally, you also want to be able to demonstrate how you've modeled multiple scenarios from aggressive, mid-range, all the way to down to conservative. Okay. So this is challenging. And what I found is most startup founders don't have the skill set or don't have the time to really build out a detailed financial model. So we provided a fill in the blanks color by numbers template in our due diligence class. That template does a couple of things. Number one is it captures all the assumptions in one place. Every one of those little orange cells is a knob or an assumption that you can turn. It breaks down assumptions into customers and sales, expenses, which include one-time, fixed, and variable expenses. Then the revenue minus the expenses, of course, equals cash flow. And this is where you can plug in where you believe you will need to raise funds to be able to make up for any shortfalls before you run out of money. Okay. Then, of course, there's another section on headcount, and the headcount is a bottoms-up detail that automatically affects the expenses numbers. All right. All these detailed assumptions then roll into an executive summary tab where the customer's headcount, revenue, expenses, and profit are all interlinked. Okay. There are multiple growth scenarios. The spreadsheet covers 4 different growth scenarios that you can tweak. All right. And the spreadsheet also gives you some automatically generated graphs with the supporting monthly detail over a 60-month growth projection. Okay. The goal of the spreadsheet when we built it is to balance ease of use and complexity and to keep the model simple and usable. So I'm going to check to see if are there any other questions here while we pop up another poll. Let me jump into here. So back and here I'd just love to be able to understand what is the current state of your startup financial model. Okay, so Steve has a question. Is the spreadsheet available? It is included in the due diligence class, which we will have a link to at the end of the session about where you can buy it off of our website. If you're an existing customer of our premium training package, that's the package that gives you all current and future classes. Even though we just released this class about a month ago, if you bought the premium training package a year back, you get this class included for free. Okay, so we'll have a link where you can go through and purchase the due diligence class if you don't already have it. Okay. So there's another question. We share the slides. We typically don't share the slides because we post the recording up on someplace, usually up on YouTube, etc. It takes us a little while to do some of the video production and cleanup stuff, just to make sure that post something clean, but we'll pass out an email. We'll distribute an email with a link to the recording at some point after this session. Okay. There's another question. I missed the slide that showed investor questions and what we do to address them with the recording be shared. Yeah. So that's basically another question about the recording content. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up the poll here and share the results so you guys can see the state of where many of the peers and on this call are at with their financial model. Okay. So let's go ahead and continue. In the financial model template that's included with the class, I mentioned we tried to balance two competing goals. One was ease of use and the other one was functionality. I love Microsoft Excel. I love doing spreadsheets and financial models. But what we really tried to do with this version of the financial model was make it self-service, make it something that the average person can easily use themselves without having to have a PhD in Excel or financial modeling. Okay. So some aspects of this tool that we created, we wanted to make sure there's a small learning curve. And if you stay to the end of this session here, we'll spend probably about 15 to 20 minutes walking through the actual financial model so you can see how it works and ask any specific questions that you might have if you believe you want to use the model. So we tried to make it a small learning curve, and we wanted to avoid minutia, okay? Financial modeling can get very hairy. When I build financial models, custom financial models for startup clients, oftentimes I use a different spreadsheet, which has 50,000 cells and formulas. All right. It's a little challenging, but if that's the type of model that you need, be happy to talk about how we can use that in your situation. Okay. We also tried to put all of the assumptions, all the knobs that you can turn in the financial model in one place. Again, we tried to keep this assumption simple. There's actually 1,100 knobs on the financial model tool, and it sounds like, oh my God, why is it so many? Okay, it's what we tried to do is have a repeating pattern of assumptions. So once you understand how the pattern works, the remaining the set of assumptions is very, very simple. So please don't get intimidated by the fact there's 1,100 knobs. You only have to learn maybe a dozen or two, a couple dozen concepts, and the rest of the assumptions just flow from there. And it says, oh, I get this, then just set the number for the next quarter, the next quarter, the next quarter. All right. So we also wanted to try to make sure that the model produced clean, pitch-ready summary numbers that you can cut and paste right into your pitch deck. Uh, the downside is that the what is the right balance in terms of the number of assumptions? Believe it or not, the assumptions here are fairly simple because of the pattern. In the custom models that we build, we have thousands of assumptions that's about 20 times more complex because that's just the nature of the financial modeling. It can be difficult to model the expenses in the model that we have included with the class because expenses can be very unique for the type of startup you are running. Okay. So rather than fully customize that and then potentially really make this model very, very complicated, we tried to keep it high level and summarized. All right. In addition, the functionality though, it does cover customers and the average customer revenue, which then implies a simple calculation what your revenue and sales are going to be. The expenses can be one-time, fixed, variable, as well as headcount expenses. Then profit and loss, which includes income tax and cash flow, that then allows you to be able to align it to your fundraising needs. Many startup founders just say, because most startups that are doing a seed round, they raise X dollars. Maybe it's $1 million or $500,000 or whatever the average is. Most startup founders just say, I'll raise the same and guess as to how many months that cash will carry them. I don't like that type of guessing. When your startup's viability is on the line, it's worth taking a little bit of extra time to actually go month by month and project the revenue and expenses so that you're not guessing and you know that if you guess that 12 months out is what your fundraise is going to carry you, but the bottoms up actually goes out 9 months, then that 3 month gap, you're in trouble. And you have to figure out a way to raise money in distress. And raising funds in distress is a terrible situation to be in. Okay. So, in order to avoid that, we recommend that you do the bottoms up and you align the details about when you'll run out of cash to support when you need to actually raise funds. The headcount portion gets into the low level detail about exactly what you're going to pay each person, what month of the year you will hire them, and it helps to be able to actually also calculate the fully loaded cost if you are hiring employees. Okay, so many people do headcount on a yearly basis. In year one, we're going to have 10 employees. Year two, we're going to have 18 employees or whatever the number is. If you do it on a yearly basis, it's not sufficiently granular. It assumes the salary is going to be charged throughout the entire 12 months. Like you hired all the new employees for that year on January 1. That's just not realistic. So the model here allows you to specify, what quarter of the, 3 to 5 year journey that you're modeling out, what quarter you're actually going to hire those individuals. It also goes into a specific monthly detail, and this is one important thing which almost never happens in most models I receive. I think I've received maybe two versions of financial models from startup founders that had this multiple growth scenarios. Okay. I don't know to believe or I don't know whether the founder can truly hit the number that they're saying in the model. Okay, so I want to be able to see, well, what if the customer growth is more aggressive, or what if it's a little bit slower because of global geopolitical problems or whatever the case may be. In order to balance its ease of use and functionality, we had to cut some functionality for some fine-grained detail. For example, we don't support multiple revenue models. In the expert version of the financial model that we have, we support like 8 different financial models, from usage-based to transaction-based to recurring revenue to one-time e-commerce, all that stuff. We even have an advertising-based model. That makes the model super complex. And in order to keep the model simple, we just had revenue estimates and not revenue modeling. Okay. Um, we also did not do monthly assumptions. We did it on a quarterly basis. We figured it was a good balance because, in our experience, most founders do annual assumptions, which we feel is not sufficiently granular. Monthly is best, but monthly would also explode, massively increase the number of assumptions that you have to do. Okay. And then, as a result of some of the functionality trade-offs, shortcuts that we had to do to keep things simple, the model is probably going to be a little bit less accurate than the expert version that I mentioned, but it's probably light years ahead of what the average model that most founders share with an investor. Okay. Um, there was also a question about the how to get access to the model. I'll share that at the end. There's a link to be able to buy the diligence course. The diligence course is $300. Okay, and the diligence course includes 22 different tools. We're only talking about one of the 22 tools. Okay, we haven't even talked about the diligence class slides itself. Okay, so let me stop the poll here. Okay, and let's continue. All right. So, in summary, the financial model, the focus is to have all this level of detail. And I can pause to see if there's any other questions before I switch gears and actually walk through some of the model live. And when we are walking through the model live, feel free, if you want to unmute yourself and interrupt and ask a question verbally. Okay. So we'll try to do our best to get through the questions. All right. So let me see if all right, so there's another question. Is this information relevant for crowdfunding? Yes, I think so, because regardless of what type of fundraise you're doing, you still should have some bottoms up backup to be able to justify the numbers you're presenting. Okay. In fact, what I would say is that the model that you adopt for your company should not be built for fundraising, whether it's crowdfunding or traditional venture scale investing. You should be building a model that is operational in nature. So I have a separate class on my website that is how to model startup financials, and we go into the low level detail on that. But the mistake that I see many founders make is that they invest the time to build a model to support a slide on an investor pitch deck. Once the investor makes the investment and the startup stops fundraising, they stop touching the model. To me, that's a mistake. You've gone to the trouble to build a realistic model. What the next step for the model should be is you should track variances on a monthly basis. If the model said this is going to be your growth path, what you want to do on a monthly basis is see, am I ahead of that journey or am I behind schedule? And if you, depending on where you're at, you can make specific decisions on a monthly basis to adjust things that you do so that you can try to get back on track if you are falling behind. Okay. Another question here. Does your model support dynamic COGS and margins? This model that's included in the diligence class does not support dynamic cost of goods sold and dynamic margin calculations. Those would be advanced features that could be done in a more flexible and more functional model. Okay. Let's see. Another question. Do you have the data showing how the financial models you've helped create for startups before capital is tracked with actual real world results? And look back, how far away are your variances typically? Okay. So the question is, do we have any historical data about how accurate the models are from the models that we built? And the answer is, I don't have any hard data, but in my experience, the model startup is somewhat accurate, 6 to 12 months out, they're doing okay, but they start to lose accuracy as time goes on. And that's why it's important to make the models operational because the model should not be a one and done deal. You should regularly be updating the model because let's say something happened that you could not predict 6 months ago when you first built the model. Well, maybe that change was significantly a good thing for you. You were able to sign a deal with a big partner, and now that you've signed that deal, potentially your revenue is going to, double or triple. Well, if that happens, you need to update the model. So I wouldn't worry too much about the level of accuracy because everybody is trying to do their best job at guessing and projecting what's going to happen. As the business continues to operate and grow, those guesses will need to be refined, which is why the model needs to be a live and living document. Okay, not a one and done thing. Okay. Let's see. Is it better to put specific hiring dates or can you enter hiring cycles? Okay, so somebody asked a question about how the model supports the hiring. Right now, um, the model allows you to enter a quarter that you believe you're going to hire a certain person at a certain salary. It does not have a cycle where you define a cycle of for every 1,000 customers, I'm going to hire one developer and two support engineers, etc. And every time you get another 1,000, then I just re-implement the cycle. I get, however many number of heads. It doesn't do that. That's a corner case situation to do some type of model within a model. All right. That would complicate things significantly. Okay. Another question. How important is projected profitability short-term versus long-term to investors compared to top-line growth? It's very, very subjective about how important, what do investors care about because it varies based on the type of company you are. If you are for example, a consumer-facing company, a B2C company, most investors who are experienced in B2C are going to be okay with it if there's not a lot of profitability early on, as long as there's healthy consumer growth. For example, Twitter did not have a clear path to profitability for a very long time, but they had explosive customer growth, user growth. Okay. And that was enough for a B2C centric investor to say, that makes sense. We'll figure out how to monetize it later because people are using it regularly. So it really depends on the type of business you are and the type of investor you're pitching to. And I'd say also to a certain degree, the current state of the market. It's not a, many advisors make the mistake, in my opinion, of giving an overly generic answer when everything tends to be more nuanced. If I just say, well, investors don't care about profitability, blah, 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 they only care about growth. That's not always true in every case. Okay. If you are a B2B enterprise SaaS company, for example, most B2B enterprise investors will want to see profitability 3, 4, 5 years down the road. Doesn't matter if you're not profitable now, but they will want to see it. Versus like the example I gave earlier, the B2C, that type of investor is different. So be careful of overly simplistic, catchy sound bites that do not really reflect the nuance of every situation. Okay, let's see. Do investors like to see worst case probable and best case scenarios? I will tell you this. I like to see it. Okay. I am an investor with Band of Angels and I evaluate probably, I get into due diligence with 2 to 3 startups every month, trying to review their info. I absolutely prefer to see the sensitivity analysis of worst case probable and best case scenarios, low end, mid range, and high end types of growth examples. All right. Do I include some examples of how others use the model? No, I don't. This particular model has only been part of the class. This model is, that I'm about to share has been included with the diligence class, and the diligence class only released a month ago. Okay. So I don't have examples of how other people have used the model, but I will share that one of the most common things that I'm asked to do when I take a fractional role with a startup is to take over some of the financials because I have the background and ability, and many startup founders would rather not get into that level of detail. Okay. So let me go ahead and stop sharing, and I will switch to the actual spreadsheet here. Okay, so let me just give it a quick overview. All right. Um, so there are multiple tabs on this financial model. The first one is a simple README with release notes type of detail. There is an executive summary tab. This is the screenshot that I showed earlier. And I'll get into the details of every tab momentarily. And then there's an assumptions tab, and as you can see, this is where all the orange cells come into play. Each major section that's delimited by the big gray horizontal bar represents a different set of assumptions that you can set for your particular startup situation. And once you've set those assumptions, they go into the monthly projections. This is the monthly projection. Let me make this bigger for everybody. Okay. This is the monthly projection for growth scenario number 1. And then there's another one for growth scenario number 2, number 3, and number 4. Okay. There's really no difference in the structure of each of those growth scenario tabs. They're all very, very similar. It's just one for each of the 4 growth scenarios that's supported. Okay. So let's get into the assumptions tab because this is probably where most startup founders will want to spend most of the time. And I'm going to make this a little bit bigger so you can kind of see this a bit better. All right. So up at the top, we have just assumptions for company name and then the first month of the financial model. We're going to assume here January 1, 2025. Let's assume, well, since we're already getting in this back half of 2025, if you wanted the model to start on January 1, 2026, just make the edit there, and then all the monthly calculations will start in January 1, 2026. Up here in the blended customers and revenue section, there's some detail. Notice that whenever we're doing some assumptions, that there are many cases where you have the ability to enter in multiple assumptions for extra small growth, small, medium, and large. If you can see this right here where I'm highlighting. Okay. And some of those assumptions to start the customer modeling is the first month of the model that you believe that you'll get your first paying customer. So many companies are, spending money to build their product, and then once the product has been released, they start to sell it. We want to model the expenses before the first customer comes in. So this is where you tell the model it's 4 months down the road, 3 months down the road, or 10 months down the road before the first customer signs. And because the first customer, if you're doing a good job, oftentimes you have pent up demand. If you've done a good job to kind of communicate to people that this product is coming, you'll have pent up demand. In the first month, how many customers will sign? So, what month will the first customer sign? And then how many customers will sign from that pent up demand? Okay. And the goal here is as you're estimating a number for one scenario, just take an extra minute to estimate the numbers for the next larger scenarios. Okay. If you don't want to do multiple scenarios, then ignore them. Just estimate for one scenario. I think it's a short-term decision that will cost you. If you're going to take the time to estimate one scenario, it takes 1 minute longer to estimate the other scenarios. Okay. And then here in the customer section, you'll notice that each of those scenarios has calculations. So along the left-hand side in column A, you'll see once you've put those numbers in, you'll see the growth per quarter. Okay. And as I mentioned earlier, the model allows you to be able to enter quarterly assumptions. So on a quarterly basis, this is the quarter over quarter, excuse me, the month over month new customer growth rate. So in other words, in this first situation here, if you have month 4 that the first customers will sign, then it's in the middle of quarter 2 that you'll start getting customers, and then you'll also tell the model what the average dollar revenue per customer is. So in this case, it's probably a consumer-based solution because the revenue per customer is $26. If you look at this, this is the extra small growth scenario number 1. If you go to the monthly projections tab, you'll notice that, let me make this bigger so people can see. Okay. We said that in growth scenario 1, the first month that the customer will sign is month 4. So here in column F, it's month 4. You'll notice months 1 through 3, no customers sign. Okay, it's in month 4 where the first customer signs, and it's 7 customers from that pent-up backlog. And then for those 7 customers having $26 per revenue per month per customer, then it's $182. Simple math. All right. And then the growth, month over month growth of 120%, which is one of the assumptions. That means you're going to get 8 new customers and then 10, et cetera. And on a quarterly basis, you can adjust the growth rate as well as the per average revenue per customer, and then it just calculates that through the next 20 quarters or 60 months. All right. Here we only have 36 months because the year 4 and 5 are hidden, but you just expand it and they pop out. Okay, so if you don't want to get distracted by year 4 and 5, you can hide it. Okay, if you only want to do a 3-year projection, then that's easily done. Okay, so for the customer growth, you just have how many customers month over month growth rate as well as the average revenue. And then you just repeat the process for the 12 to 20 quarters that you want to model. And then you do the same thing for small, medium, and large. This is where I mentioned earlier, you have a repeating pattern of assumptions. We found that this process allows it to be a bit simpler for people, okay, to do the assumptions. Then let's go to the operating expenses. Okay, you have 3 types of expenses: fixed, one-time, and variable. Okay, one thing that you may notice is that this model does not get into individual line item accounts, expense accounts, okay, that you might have in QuickBooks or whatever. And we did that intentionally because in most startups, the structure of the expense accounts varies greatly. And if we implemented individual line item expense accounts, modeling this out would be 10 times more complex. If you want to model that data, then I have a different, more advanced model that's included in our financial modeling class. Okay. Um, so here, in building out the expenses, you have a blanket assumption about variable monthly expenses as a percent of revenue. What you want to be able to do is, in many cases, when you sell more, you'll spend more. Okay. So the variable component of the expenses is tied to the revenue. If you have 1,000 customers, then you probably need more customer service representatives to support them. So you can just do a blanket number here. That's for the variable monthly expenses. And then there's a fixed number for one-time admin expenses. If you know that in quarter 3 you're going to have a one-time expense because you got to buy a piece of equipment or something like that, then go ahead and put that in there. There's some fixed non-worker expenses for the monthly quarter, and this is, for example, if you have um, shared office space at a WeWork or your favorite co-working space, and you know it's going to cost you $1,000 a month or whatever. Okay, you enter the numbers there. Then there's segment-based expenses like what you're going to spend on product and engineering and marketing on sales. Okay, you enter those numbers in, and those numbers then go affect the monthly calculations. All right, they are projected out here. Okay. So I'm not going to get into too much of the detail there. One thing that's very significant is the head count. So we actually tried to build out a fairly flexible headcount model. All right. Um, and you'll notice that there are 7 tiers of staff that you can hire based on what you will pay them on a, annual salary basis. So not everybody that you hire is going to be super expensive. Not everybody is going to be super cheap. So uh, we give you the capability to specify 7 different tiers, and you can set the salary for each one of those tiers from fairly low cost, $40,000 per year, all the way to fairly high cost, $250,000 per year at tier 7. Okay. And then we also have, so you can build in salary adjustments, compensation adjustments. There's this below market salary adjustment factor because most startups pay below market. If this is the market salary that you would pay, then on year one, if this is the market salary that a general company would pay, but you're a startup, you're short on cash. So in year one, you'll probably pay 30% below market, year two, 25%, year three, 20%, et cetera, until year 5, where you're just a little bit below market. Okay, so you can adjust those numbers based on your situation. Okay, so with the 7 different salary tiers, you also have the fully loaded cost factor. Most lazy accountants will say, add 25% to your salary, and that's what it costs for health benefits and payroll taxes. But if you have a super expensive person, like this $250,000 salary person, maybe the 25% is accurate. But if you have a less expensive person, like a tier 2, a $60,000 per year, the actual health benefit cost and payroll tax is much higher. It's not 25%. It's probably closer to 80% or more. Okay, so we allow you to do this very granular modeling of the proper loading factor, and anybody who's done operational finance will understand that, yeah, it's not one blended average number. If you do the blended average number, it's an approximation. It could work, but you'll probably have introduced variance and errors in your financial modeling. Then, once you've decided what your salary structure is going to be, then you can specify in what quarter you will hire how many people, okay, and at what tier. So here in this extra small, we have a fractional person who works 2/3 of the week. and that person is normally would be paid a market salary of $60,000, and then you just specify in what quarter you'll add additional staff. Okay. So those numbers then go out to the monthly projections. Notice that there is a number here, excuse me. There is a number for the payroll expenses. Okay. Um, Employee costs fully loaded right there. So whatever you do on those assumptions, it just calculates here on a monthly basis. Okay. Then I will kind of point out also, once you have all the expenses, um, the revenue and the expenses, then this is where the cash flow number comes in. You specify at the beginning of the model what's the starting cash balance and what the income tax rate is. Income tax probably doesn't apply because most startups don't make a profit for a while. But if you're one of those rare companies that do make a profit early, then you can have an accounting for income tax as well. So basically what this does is with your starting cash balance and with the cash flow based on the revenue and expenses, it's going to project your ending cash balance on a monthly basis. And that is going to be very, very important because that ending cash balance here in row 49, that shows what you think you're going to have in the bank and when you need to actually raise funds. You may notice here that in this model in quarter three, this particular startup had to raise $250,000 because their ending cash balance at the end of quarter two was only 13,000. All right. So this provides the bottoms up support to help people understand where you're when you will need cash and when you'll need to fundraise. All right. So all of that flows into the executive summary. We have the summary table that you'll probably copy into your pitch deck. So let me go ahead and make this, whoops, sorry. Let me go ahead and make this a bit bigger. All right. So in growth scenario number one, it calculates the number of customers you have, the total revenue, and this is in thousands of dollars. So in year five, you're actually at 4 million in revenue. The expenses and the net income, you can just cut and paste or copy this into your pitch deck to be able to support the calculations. And this number here is the number of full-time equivalent headcount. This is kind of useful to do a little bit of a sanity check because a simple sanity check is going to be something like annual sales per head count to make sure you're not doing something silly where your model runs amok and you're assuming $10 million in annual revenue per head count, which would be about 5 times the profitability of Google. Okay. So, as you can see, we have a good amount of detail where you just fill in the blanks, and these summary numbers get calculated as well as some of the basic charts that if you wanted to, you could copy and paste or replicate and have your graphic artist make a more pretty chart into your pitch deck. So I've been going on for a while here about the model. Hopefully you have a perspective on how this all works. Let me go ahead and change the share back and I can start taking questions as well as get back to the point about how you can potentially get access to this class and the model. So let me go ahead and share back with that guy. Okay. So this is the due diligence course. Okay. Okay. We have the best practices and tools. It's includes the 22 tools in the toolkit, and we price it at 299 bucks. If you're interested, this is the QR code you can scan to be able to go to the checkout page. I will go ahead and copy and paste into the chat window. If you don't have your phone handy, would rather click, then you can reference this link to be able to go to the checkout. The other thing that I was going to say is that if you are interested, we do have another webinar coming up this Thursday in 2 days. So that particular webinar is going to be on our startup pitch deck report card, which is kind of like a scorecard. You can register for that event here. It's free. We'll talk through the details of our pitch scorecard to help you improve your pitch deck. All right. Let me go ahead and see if there are any other questions here. All right. What's the minimum number of time, manpower, hours a startup company needs to dedicate to initially creating and then maintaining a reasonable financial model? Um, this is a difficult question to ask because it's like saying, how long is a piece of string? The answer is it depends on what that string is used for. Okay. Um, so I would think though that on average, if you spend less than, if you don't have any tools, to replicate all this work would probably take 80 to 100 hours. Okay. If you use the tool that I just shared, I think it's possible to build a multi-scenario model in as little as 5 hours or less. Okay. If you're a whiz with Excel, you might even get it done in three. Okay. Um, so Um, looks like some other folks shared how much time it took for them to do it. It really kind of depends, again, on how detailed you make the model, how complex your business is, whether you do multiple scenarios or not, how granular you do it. There are some people I know who just do annual models, meaning revenue and customers on an annual basis. That can take an hour. But unfortunately, even if you build your own model, one thing I didn't talk about here is that you want the model to be very easily interpreted by the investor. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a model and I'm pretty comfortable with Excel, and I look at the model and I'm like, I can't make out heads or tails of this thing. I start inspecting the formulas. I start trying to reverse engineer. In probably one-third of the cases, I find broken formulas. Okay. And when that happens, I just like throw my hands up. I don't trust this at all. I'm going to go back to the founder and say, you need to do a better job. You need to do this, etc. And I remember I talked about when you fail diligence, it delays your fundraise. That would be a showstopper, full stop on the fundraise. Okay, for me at least. All right. So the quality of your model, I think, can be very, very significant. You you don't want something as simple as this to stall or sidetrack your fundraise. Okay. Let's see. There's a question. Is there a coupon code for today's attendees? No, we don't have a coupon code. Um, the reality is, I've just showed you one of the tools. I think it can save you in just 3 to 5 hours. You can get your own financial model done versus 80 hours. What's the value of that in your time? It's 300 bucks. Okay. Um, so I know people sometimes look for the codes and stuff. What I found is that we've tried to make it very aggressively priced, so hopefully a coupon code's not needed. Okay. Okay. Oh, got a comment from Christian saying that the Doodles class and toolkit's a must. Thank you very much. Thank you. Appreciate the thumbs up on that. All right. Let's see if there's anything else. If anybody, I haven't been able to keep up with all the questions that came up. If I missed a question, then please feel free to either paste it back into the chat window or unmute yourself and ask it verbally. How do you accommodate for different types of clients that generate dramatically different average monthly revenue? Okay. So there's a very good question Rod asked about how do you build a template model that is flexible enough that it supports different types of startups, and maybe startup one has very different revenue than startup two. Okay. Well, this is where all those knobs in the spreadsheet, if you have very different revenue assumptions, then hopefully turn the knob in the direction that fits your company, and the next company will do the same thing. So we tried to make it somewhat flexible. I do think this model is a balance of ease of use and functionality. If you want a more complex model, then you can either go with the advanced spreadsheet from our financial modeling class, or there are actually third-party SaaS tools that you can build financial models, and they're kind of nice. They can also be expensive. My favorite third-party SaaS tool to build financial model is $7,000 a year. Okay, so 300 bucks here on this, or 7,000 a year, 300 bucks one time, 7,000 a year recurring. You do the math. Okay. Does acquiring a customer equal the date that the customer signs a purchase order, the date they pay? For example, you may sign a customer in month one, but you not see payment for another month. So the current model that we have does not account for deferred revenue. It assumes that the month that they sign is the month that they pay. I understand that's not always the case, but we had to simplify things because in some cases, in a consumer-based environment, that is likely what's going to happen. But in a maybe a B2B environment, that's not the case. But in order to support the wide spectrum of different types of customers, we basically simplified it with the month that they sign and you have recognizable revenue is the month that they pay. If that is not your situation, then you can do some other things like potentially reduce the amount of the annual contract value or the average monthly revenue. If it's really $100 a month, you can reduce the average revenue to something like $90 a month, and that will account for some of the delay. You can also potentially delay the start date of when the customer signs. So if you think your first customer is going to come in month six, but you have this deferred cash in the door thing, you might hopefully you don't have more than 30 to 60 days before cash comes in the door. You could, if you think month six is when you get the first customer, then you could manually adjust it to month eight because that's when the cash comes in the door. There's some minor things that you can do to work around this, but unfortunately, because financial modeling is so complex, if we supported all that in the model, then it would be 10 times more difficult to use the model. Okay.
Hey Sam,
Yes.
this is Rod. I asked a question about the different client types, and
Mhm.
I have a fairly complex financial model that I'm trying to create. And I mean, part of the problem is I've got multiple revenue streams, and each revenue stream has a different client profile.
Mhm.
And when I try to put those into any type of a graph, a line chart that shows all of those different revenue streams, it just starts to look very complex and
Mhm.
hard to decipher. And I'm just wondering how's the best way to do that?
Yeah, it sounds like you have something that's a little bit more unique. And I have this other slide, which is from the diligence class, which explains where I have with financial modeling options. So you have what I've been talking about earlier, ease of use as a goal, and you have another goal of functionality in the model, which creates a 2 by 2 matrix. In my experience, you can do a Google search for startup financial model, and you'll get usually a spreadsheet, and that spreadsheet will be kind of in the lower left-hand corner of this 2 by 2 matrix. Okay, that's most third-party tools. The tool I just shared, in my opinion, is right there, kind of in the towards the center. That's what I call the standard spreadsheet for that we have. All right. It supports multiple scenarios, and it is included in the diligence class. The advanced spreadsheet that I've been referring to is included in the financial modeling class, and I actually have another one, an expert version, which I don't distribute because that's the one with 50,000 cells, and it's just overwhelming. But there are also, if you have a unique situation and modeling is really important to you, I tend to refer to a lot of customers to a company called Forecaster. They are,
Forecaster is actually one of our sponsors,
yeah,
so
fantastic.
I'm very familiar with them.
Yeah, yeah. I love the product. I love the tool. And for those of you who are able to pay several $1,000s a year, then you may want to take a look at their platform. I will, if you want, I can make an introduction, and through the introduction, because I refer so many startups to them, then you can get a small discount, like a 20% discount on your subscription fee. Okay. But the one downside about, and I've told Forecaster this many times, they need to do a better job of supporting multiple scenarios. If you're not comfortable with Excel, seriously take a look at a third-party platform because I think it will help a lot. But it is going to cost, unfortunately. They're not free. Okay. So I don't have a very good answer for you other than either switch to a different version of the spreadsheet that we have, customize the spreadsheet if you're comfortable with Excel, or use a third-party SaaS tool like Forecaster.
I was just wondering if I used your tool and built a model for
Hmm.
each revenue stream, it seems like that would work. And but then I just need to deal with how do I combine those all into um, a single representation that doesn't look like chicken scratch.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and we actually have already done that in the advanced model that's included with the financial modeling class. So your choices are either take the standard spreadsheet in the diligence class, which we've been talking about, and edit it yourself. I did not lock it down. Okay, I turned protection on with no password, so you can so it avoids inadvertent mistakes where you're going to stomp on and break a formula. But if you know what you're doing, disable protection, no password, and do your own spreadsheet surgery. Okay. If you don't want to do that, then you can. The second choice would be consider looking at the financial modeling class, which has the more advanced spreadsheet. It's got 40,000 cells in that version of the spreadsheet. Okay. Or go with a SaaS tool. Okay. All right. Question. Are there any AI power tools that you know of can help accelerate the process of creating a financial model? I don't know of any AI tools. I'm sure somebody's probably working on it. Um, is what I find is that there's so much low-level detail that if you're trying to use an AI tool, your system prompt is going to be huge. Okay. To try to tell the AI tool to change this, change that, and at some point, it kind of you're spending so much time trying to describe it that maybe you should consider using a different tool. If anybody has any experience with AI financial modeling, please speak up. Um, yeah, yeah, Jignesh had a very good point here. You end up being a prompt engineer versus a founder. That's a very good point, Jignesh. Thank you. Okay. Tim, you had a question?
Yeah, actually, more just a quick statement, Sam. Great job. I've got no affiliation with Sam or your program, and I jump on these. I'm an entrepreneur at exits, MBA, CPA, and now on the VC side. And I look for good resources we can direct founders to, so because we're not getting involved in there. And I would double click on just about everything you said there, as far as the importance of this, the information as an active angel and VC. This is
Mhm.
critical. This is your business model. Those inputs that you're talking about, the functionality that you have in this allows somebody like me to look at this, evaluate it, understand the business, even more so than the presentation. So hats off to what you're doing. The price point is dirt cheap for those who are wondering what it will cost you to go do it on your own or try to hack it, save a few $100s. It's wildly impactful, but also if it's not the right fit for us and we understand the business as an investor, I might be able to introduce you to somebody. If we can't understand the business, we don't understand the economics, the network effect just dies right there too. So not only are we out, but the ability to refer. So great job, Sam. This is a phenomenal package you got.
Yeah, thank you, Tim. And by the way, just to let people know, as an angel investor, also a member of the Angel Capital Association. One of my goals is to standardize angel level diligence. Okay. Later we'll work on, Series A diligence, etc. But we're having some conversations because every angel group has their own diligence checklist and they don't have any tools and we end up getting models that are completely different and very difficult to decipher. So I'm trying to see if we can get the angel groups across the US to start standardizing, and maybe they'll standardize on this stuff if I can, build up enough interest. So hopefully this gets more pervasive. Okay. All right. Let's see. Jignesh. Oh, Jignesh kept me in, please, with angel groups. Jignesh, please, DM direct message me with your contact info, and I'll gladly reach out to you with any progress on some of these angel group level diligence. The entire goal about this diligence course was I wanted to make it less work for a founder to set up their diligence and less work for an investor to inspect the diligence. Okay. What I found is that everybody needs to do diligence when they're going through a fundraise, but the lack of tools just makes it just painful. And if you've ever done any handyman work around the house, you know when you have power tools, how much of a difference it makes. I don't know if there's any other questions. Looks like Craig just used AI to build a model. Feel free to uh, well, we're at the end of a call. There's not a whole lot of time to be able to continue with that. But it looks like Craig's got some experience. Craig, if you can share your last name, then maybe people can look you up on LinkedIn. Okay.
Sure. Craig McBurney, Embark Fund.
Okay.
So I don't build financial models for a living. I've run large construction projects, and we're developing some large master plan communities that have no interconnection to the grid. So, my particular expertise is around the development of the energy infrastructure and a bunch of other parts of the business. And so, but I needed a financial model for a neighborhood that's going to be a corporate executive rental neighborhood.
Uh,
Uh, and so I went to ChatGPT 5 and basically
mhm,
wrote some very basic instructions, but specifically used the words corporate executive rental
uh-huh.
community. And it was actually pretty efficient. And the model that
Okay.
came back was pretty well organized, except that in watching your presentation today, um, what you don't have is you don't have the ability to understand what some of the things mean in the model unless
Mm,
you go out and the corporate finance hire for the corporate finance role.
mhm,
We're holding off on that to retain some equity in the company until we've gotten some other
mhm,
milestones in place. And so it seems to me that you can get a financial model built. At least we did. It was pretty
mhm,
accurate, it appears, with a lot of flexibility, and then converted into sensitivity model choice, if you like, or graphs or
okay.
Excel or whatever. But then you still don't have the expertise to sort of get some feedback on how to develop more parts of the model.
Yeah, so you raised an excellent point. I would caution people on only focusing on the cost and time to build the model. The cost and time to build the model is going to be smaller than the cost and time to maintain the model. If you use AI to build the first version of the model, then 6 months down the road, when something in the business changes, you'll probably have to go back to AI and try to say, well, this changed. Can you tweak this? Maybe that would work, but it seems like now you're going into the challenge of what Jignesh said, prompt engineering to refine it so that the AI would revise the model appropriately. I don't know if we're really there yet to fully delegate the financial modeling to an AI agent. I don't know if we're there. I think we're still a little ways away. But I understand the goal. Just keep in mind the cost to build the model and the cost to maintain and the maintenance, keeping it synced with your business, doing month by month variances and stuff, as well as from an operator's perspective, updating it. I think that's going to be much more costly. So my initial thought is most people who are asking about AI probably aren't, finance people or maybe not very comfortable with Excel, maybe. I'm going to guess the majority. At some point, you'll probably have to find somebody who can actually own this until AI gets to the point where it does everything, including, being my personal assistant for every problem in the world, AI to help me parent my kids too. All right. Thank you, everybody, for staying long. Hopefully, this is helpful. We do have other events coming up. We've got the event coming up on Thursday this coming week, which once again, if you haven't had a chance to register, let me go ahead and replicate that link here. We also have an event, I think, in about 2 weeks, where we're going to go through another aspect of our diligence toolkit. In that event, we'll talk about exit analysis, and that's very important because investors will not make money until there's an exit, typically. All right. So making sure that how you tell your exit story so that it is credible and believable is going to be pretty important to helping an investor say, "Oh, this does look like a good investment." All right. So thank you for your time. Hopefully this is helpful. Do take a look at our website, fundablestartups.com, where we are trying to do our darndest to help everybody build their own fundable company. Thank you very much. Bye. Oh, there's another question. Sorry. What's the cost of the high-level products? We have the premium training package is $1,000 on the website, fundablestartups.com. Thanks. If this was helpful, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. You can also check out our other videos for more startup content.